The stagecoach rattled into Cheyenne, Wyoming on a blistering August afternoon in 1882, carrying cargo more precious than gold or cattle deeds, and Colt Emmett stood at the depot with his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner trying to break free. He had written exactly 3 letters in his entire 24 years of life, and all 3 had been to the matrimonial agency in San Antonio that promised to match lonesome cowboys with respectable women seeking new lives out west. What he had not anticipated, what the agency had somehow failed to mention in their flowery correspondence, was that his bride-to-be spoke not a single word of English. The woman who stepped down from the coach was smaller than he had imagined, with dark hair braided in a crown around her head and eyes the color of strong coffee. She wore a traveling dress of deep blue that had seen better days, and she clutched a worn leather bag as though it contained everything she owned in this world. When the driver handed down a second, larger trunk, she said something rapid and musical that Colt could not understand, though her tone suggested gratitude. Then she turned those coffee-colored eyes on him, and he felt his mouth go dry as desert sand. "Miss Luna Alvarez?" he managed, holding his hat in both hands. She nodded slowly, studying his face with an expression he could not read. "Senor Emmett?" "Yes, madam. Colt Emmett." He gestured to himself, then realized how foolish he must look. "I reckon you must be tired from the journey. It is a far piece from Texas." She watched his lips as he spoke, her brow furrowing in concentration. But when he finished, she simply shook her head and replied with a stream of Spanish words that might as well have been birdsong for all he comprehended. The reality of their situation settled over him like a heavy blanket. He had paid good money for those letters, had poured his heart into describing his ranch and his prospects, had received in return what he believed were her thoughts and dreams translated into English. Now he wondered how much had been lost or invented in the translation. The depot master, a grizzled man named Henderson who had seen every variety of human drama unfold at his station, cleared his throat. "Sounds like you got yourself a communication problem there, Emmett." "I can see that, Henderson." Colt picked up her trunk, surprised by its weight. "But I gave my word I would marry her, and I am a man of my word." Luna said something else, gesturing at the trunk, then at herself, then at the town spread out before them. Colt caught only the worry in her voice. "It will be all right," he said, knowing she could not understand but hoping his tone might convey what his words could not. "I will figure this out." They were married 3 hours later by Judge Carver, who spoke even less Spanish than Colt did, which was to say none at all. The judge asked the standard questions, Colt answered in English and Luna answered in Spanish, and somehow the law deemed it binding. She wore the same blue traveling dress, and Colt had changed into his Sunday shirt, the only one without patches or permanent stains. When the judge pronounced them man and wife, Colt leaned in to kiss her cheek, but Luna turned her head at the last moment, and his lips brushed the corner of her mouth instead. She pulled back, not in anger but in surprise, and he felt heat creep up his neck. The ride to his ranch took an hour on the wagon, and they sat side by side in silence broken only by the creak of the wheels and the clip-clop of the horses. Colt pointed out landmarks as they passed, naming them clearly even though she could not understand. "That there is the Whitmore spread. Good people. And over that ridge is where the creek runs widest. Fine fishing in the spring." Luna watched everything with keen attention, and once she pointed to a hawk circling overhead and said something that sounded like appreciation. The ranch itself was modest, a sturdy house built of timber and stone with a barn, a corral, and pastures that stretched toward the distant mountains. Colt raised cattle, about 200 head, and he employed 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse near the barn. As they pulled up to the house, both men emerged to see the new mistress, their hats already in their hands. "Boys, this is my wife, Luna," Colt said, helping her down from the wagon. "Luna, these are my hands, Pete and Joaquin." "Joaquin," A lean man of about 30 with Mexican heritage stepped forward and addressed Luna in rapid Spanish. Her face transformed, relief washing over her features like sunrise, and she responded with such enthusiasm that Joaquin actually smiled. Pete, a taciturn man from Missouri, shifted his weight from foot to foot and muttered something about getting back to work. "What did she say?" Colt asked Joaquin. "She thanks you for bringing her here. She says she will be a good wife and work hard. She asks if there is water for washing and where she should put her things." Joaquin paused. "She also asks if you are angry that she does not speak English." Colt looked at Luna, who watched him with those dark eyes full of uncertainty. "Tell her I am not angry. Tell her I am glad she is here safe. And tell her this is her home now, and she can arrange it however she likes." Joaquin translated, and Luna's expression softened. She said something else, shorter this time. "She says you are kind," Joaquin reported. That first night was awkward in ways Colt had not anticipated. He showed Luna through the house, which consisted of a main room with a kitchen area, a bedroom, and a small storage room that could serve as a second bedroom if needed. His father had built the house with the hope of filling it with children, but he had died 5 years ago, and Colt's mother had passed when he was just a boy. The furniture was plain but well made, everything functional and nothing fancy. Luna set her bag on the bed, then turned to him with a question in her eyes. Colt understood what she was asking without needing translation. He pointed to the bed, then to her, then gestured to the main room where he had a rocking chair by the fireplace. "You take the bed," he said slowly. "I will sleep out there until you are comfortable." She frowned, clearly not understanding his words, so he mimed sleeping in the chair, then pointed at her and the bed again. Recognition dawned, and she shook her head, speaking firmly and pointing at him. Then the bed, then herself. She made a gesture as if splitting something down the middle. "You want to share?" he asked, feeling that heat crawl up his neck again. "All right then, we can do that." They lay on opposite sides of the bed that night, a careful gap between them, both staring at the ceiling in the darkness. Colt could hear her breathing, could smell the faint scent of lavender from her hair, and he wondered what she was thinking. Did she regret coming all this way to marry a stranger? Did she miss her home, her family? He had so many questions and no way to ask them. The next morning, he woke to find her already up, dressed, and attempting to make coffee at the stove. She had found his supplies but seemed puzzled by the proportions. When he entered, she looked up and said something that might have been "good morning," or might have been "help me before I ruin this." He came to stand beside her, careful not to crowd her space, and showed her how much coffee and how much water. She watched intently, then nodded and took over, shooing him away with a flick of her hand that made him smile despite himself. When she poured him a cup a few minutes later, it was strong enough to strip paint, but he drank it down and told her it was perfect, earning a skeptical look that suggested she knew he was being generous. After breakfast, Colt went out to work the cattle with Pete and Joaquin, and when he returned at midday for the meal they called dinner, he found Luna had swept the house, organized the kitchen, and somehow produced a pot of beans with salt pork that tasted better than anything he had made for himself in years. She served him with a quiet pride, then sat across the table and ate her own portion. They shared the silence, and it felt less awkward than the night before. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Colt made a decision. He found Joaquin in the barn tending to a horse with a sore hoof. "I need you to teach me Spanish," Colt said without preamble. Joaquin looked up, surprise clear on his weathered face. "You want to learn Spanish? I want to talk to my wife. Really talk to her. Not just point at things and hope she understands." Colt leaned against the stall door. "How hard can it be?" "Depends on the man doing the learning," Joaquin said with a slight smile. "Some pick it up quick. Others never get past Buenos dias. I will learn it, Colt said firmly. I have to. They started that very night after supper. Colt sat at the table with a stub of pencil and a piece of paper, and Joaquin began with the basics. Buenos dias. Good morning. Buenas noches. Good night. ¿Cómo está? How are you? Colt repeated each phrase carefully, his tongue stumbling over the unfamiliar sounds. Luna watched from the rocking chair where she was mending one of his shirts, and he thought he saw approval in her eyes. The next morning he tried out his new knowledge. Buenos dias, he said to Luna when he came to breakfast. Her face lit up like a lamp. Buenos dias, Colt, she replied, and the sound of his name in her accent did something strange to his chest. Days turned into weeks, and Colt attacked Spanish with the same determination he brought to breaking a stubborn horse or mending a fence line that stretched for miles. Every evening after dinner, he studied with Joaquin, learning not just phrases but grammar, verb conjugations, the countless little rules that govern the language. His progress was slow at first, frustrating as trying to catch water in a sieve, but gradually words began to stick. He learned to ask for things at meals, to comment on the weather, to say please and thank you and excuse me. Luna, for her part, seemed to appreciate his efforts in a way that went beyond mere politeness. She began to teach him too, pointing at objects around the house and saying their Spanish names until he could repeat them back correctly. Mesa, she would say, touching the table. Silla, tapping a chair. Ventana, gesturing at the window. She was patient with his mistakes, gently correcting his pronunciation, and sometimes when he got something right, she would smile in a way that made all the effort worthwhile. He learned that she was 22 years old, that she had grown up in a small village in Mexico before moving to San Antonio with her aunt after her parents died of fever. The aunt had died too, just last year, leaving Luna alone and struggling to make ends meet. The matrimonial agency had seemed like a chance at a new life, a fresh start. She had been frightened to come so far to marry a stranger. She admitted one night in halting words that Colt now understood, but she had hoped for kindness if not love. You have been kind, she said in Spanish, and Colt understood every word. More than I expected. You deserve kindness, he replied in his still clumsy Spanish. You deserve more than that. As autumn painted the aspen trees gold and sent the cattle down from the high pastures, Colt found himself thinking about Luna at odd moments during the workday. The way she hummed while she cooked, the careful way she tended the small garden she had planted behind the house, the fierce concentration on her face when she was teaching him a new Spanish word. They still slept on opposite sides of the bed, that careful gap maintained, but sometimes he would wake in the night to find her turned toward him, or he would catch her watching him over breakfast with an expression he was starting to recognize as affection. The first real conversation they had, beyond simple exchanges about daily life, happened on an October evening when the air had turned crisp and Colt had brought in wood for the winter. Luna was making tortillas, a skill she had learned from her mother, and the smell filled the house with warmth. Colt sat at the table, ostensibly reading a newspaper but actually watching her work the dough with quick, practiced movements. Why did you want a wife? She asked suddenly in Spanish, not turning from her work. Colt set down the paper. He had enough Spanish now to attempt a real answer. I was lonely, he said carefully. The ranch is good, but a man needs more than cattle and land. He needs someone to talk to, someone to build a life with. You could have found a woman here, Luna pointed out. Why write to an agency? The women here, they know me, Colt said, struggling to put his thoughts into Spanish words. They know I am just a rancher, not rich, not important. They want more than I can give. He paused. I thought maybe a woman from somewhere else would see me different. See the man, not just what he has or does not have. Luna turned then, a tortilla still in her hands. And what do you see when you look at me? It was a loaded question, and Colt knew his answer mattered. "I see someone brave," he said. "Someone who came far from home to try for a better life. Someone who works hard and does not complain. Someone who has made this house feel like a home." He met her eyes. "I see someone I want to know better." She held his gaze for a long moment, then returned to her cooking, but he saw the smile she tried to hide. By November, Colt was conversing in Spanish with increasing confidence, though he still made grammatical errors that made Joaquin wince and Luna laugh. He could discuss the ranch work, the weather, the news from town. More importantly, he could ask Luna about her thoughts, her feelings, her dreams. He learned that she had always wanted to learn to ride a horse but had never had the opportunity. He learned that her favorite color was the deep blue of twilight. He learned that she loved stories, especially ones about adventure and faraway places, even though she had never traveled much herself until coming to Wyoming. One Sunday, he decided to teach her to ride. He saddled up Rosie, the gentlest mare in his string, and led her to the corral where Luna waited, looking both excited and nervous in split skirts she had fashioned from an old pair of his work pants. "Are you sure about this?" she asked in Spanish. "Very sure," he replied, also in Spanish. "Every ranch wife should know how to ride. Besides, I want to show you the land. It is beautiful up in the hills." He helped her mount, his hands steadying her as she found her seat in the saddle. She gripped the saddle horn so tight her knuckles went white, but when Rosie began to walk in a slow circle, guided by Colt on a lead line, Luna's face broke into a delighted grin. They spent an hour in the corral, Colt teaching her the basics of sitting, holding the reins, using her legs to guide the horse. She was a quick study, fearless once she got past the initial nervousness, and by the end, she was walking Rosie around without the lead line. "Next week we will try trotting," Colt said, grinning up at her. "Next week, we will ride into the hills," Luna countered, and he could hear the challenge in her voice. "Deal," he said and helped her down. For a moment, she was close enough that he could count the faint freckles across her nose, close enough that he could see the flecks of amber in her dark eyes. She did not step back immediately, and neither did he, and something electric seemed to crackle in the air between them. "Colt," she said softly. "Luna," he replied. Then Pete came around the corner calling something about a broken fence, and the moment shattered. Luna stepped back, smoothing her skirts, and Colt turned to deal with ranch business. But he felt changed somehow, as though something had shifted between them that could not be shifted back. That night, the gap in the bed seemed both wider and narrower than before. Colt lay awake, acutely aware of Luna breathing in the darkness beside him, and he wondered if she was awake too. He wanted to reach across the distance, to take her hand, to pull her close, but he held back. He had promised himself he would not rush her, would not assume his rights as a husband just because the law and church said he could. She had to come to him willingly, had to want him as much as he was beginning to realize he wanted her. December brought snow to the high country and cold winds that howled around the house at night. Colt brought the cattle down to the winter pastures and made sure the barn was tight and the hay stores were sufficient. Luna proved herself invaluable during this time, cooking hearty meals that kept the men warm and strong, helping to nurse a sick calf back to health, never complaining about the cold or the work. She also insisted on continuing her riding lessons despite the weather, and Colt found himself looking forward to those stolen hours when it was just the two of them and the horses and the wide Wyoming sky. On a particularly cold afternoon, as they rode back from checking the line shack in the north pasture, fat snowflakes began to fall. Luna tilted her face up to catch them on her tongue, laughing like a child, and Colt felt something in his chest expand until it nearly hurt. "Have you seen much snow before?" he asked in Spanish. "Never like this," she replied, still smiling. "In Mexico, in the mountains, sometimes a little, but never so much, never so beautiful." They were nearly back to the ranch when her horse, a gelding named Tucker, spooked at a rabbit bursting from the brush. Tucker shied sideways and Luna, still not experienced enough to anticipate the movement, slipped from the saddle. Colt was off his own horse in an instant, his heart in his throat, but Luna was already sitting up in the snow, more surprised than hurt. "Are you injured?" he demanded, dropping to his knees beside her, his hands running over her arms and shoulders checking for breaks or sprains. "I am fine," she said, but her voice shook a little. "Just my pride that is hurt." Relief made him almost giddy. "Your pride will recover. Come on. Let us get you home and warmed up." He helped her to her feet, and she leaned against him for a moment, and this time there was no one to interrupt. Colt looked down at her, snow catching in her dark hair, her cheeks flushed with cold and maybe something else, and before he could think better of it, he leaned down and kissed her properly, the way he had wanted to since that awkward wedding day. She went still for a heartbeat, then her arms came up around his neck, and she was kissing him back with a hunger that matched his own. The snow fell around them, the horses waited patiently, and Colt Emmett fell the rest of the way in love with his wife. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luna looked up at him with eyes full of wonder and heat. "I have been waiting for you to do that," she said in Spanish. "I have been waiting to be sure you wanted me to," he replied. "Fool," she said fondly, and kissed him again. That night, there was no gap in the bed. Luna came into his arms with a willingness that took his breath away, and he held her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. They talked in whispers in the darkness, a mixture of Spanish and English, sharing secrets and hopes and fears. She told him about her loneliness after her aunt died, about the fear that she would end up in a bad situation, about the leap of faith it had taken to answer his advertisement. He told her about the pressure he had felt to find a wife, to not let the ranch his father built die with him, about his own loneliness in the years after his father's death. "Are you happy you came?" he asked, needing to know. "I am happy," she said simply. "Are you happy I came?" "Happier than I have been in years," he admitted. She kissed his jaw, his cheek, the corner of his mouth. "Good," she said, "because I am not going anywhere." Christmas came, and Colt gave Luna a gift he had been working on in secret, a leather-bound journal with her initials tooled into the cover. Inside the front page, he had written in his best Spanish, "For your stories and dreams." She cried when she opened it, then kissed him in front of Pete and Joaquin, who had come to the house for Christmas dinner, causing both men to suddenly find the ceiling fascinating. Luna's gift to him was more practical but no less thoughtful. She had made him a new shirt from fabric she had purchased with egg money, stitched with careful precision, and she had embroidered his initials over the pocket. When he put it on, it fit perfectly, and he felt like the richest man in Wyoming. The winter deepened, and the ranch work continued in that relentless way it always did. Cows needed feeding, ice needed breaking in the water troughs, fences needed mending. But now Colt came home each evening to a warm house, a hot meal, and a woman who smiled when she saw him. Luna began to learn English, picking it up faster than he had learned Spanish, and soon they were mixing both languages in their conversations, switching back and forth as mood and vocabulary dictated. In January of 1883, a blizzard swept through that lasted 3 days. The men stayed close to the barn, making sure the cattle that had clustered near the windbreaks had access to hay, while Luna kept the house warm and the food coming. On the second night, when the wind was howling like demons and the windows rattled in their frames, Luna came to Colt as he sat by the fire and settled into his lap. "Tell me we will be safe," she said, half in Spanish, half in English. "We will be safe," he promised, wrapping his arms around her. "This house has stood through worse storms than this. My father built it to last." "Tell me about your father," she said, snuggling closer. So he did, stories he had not shared in years, about the man who had come west with nothing but ambition and will, who had built the ranch from raw land and hard work, who had loved Colt's mother with a devotion that had been almost frightening in its intensity. When his mother died, his father had poured all that love into the ranch and into raising Colt, teaching him everything he knew about cattle, horses, and being a good man. "He would have liked you," Colt said when he finished. "He always said a ranch needed a strong woman at its heart." "I will try to be strong enough," Luna said softly. "You already are," Colt assured her. By the time the storm finally blew itself out, the snow had drifted as high as the porch railings in some places, and the world looked clean and new under a brilliant blue sky. Colt and the hands spent days digging out, checking on the herd, taking stock of any losses. They were lucky. Only 3 head had been lost, and those were old cattle that probably would not have made it through the winter anyway. February brought a thaw, and with it, news from town. Judge Carver had died of a heart ailment, and there was to be a new judge coming in from back east. The Whitmore family had welcomed a new baby, their 7th, and the schoolteacher, Miss Patterson, was looking for someone to teach Spanish to the children whose families had come up from Mexico to work the ranches. "You should do it," Colt said to Luna when he heard the news. "You would be good at teaching." Luna looked uncertain. "My English is not perfect yet." "It is good enough," Colt insisted. "And you could teach them Spanish and learn more English at the same time. Besides, it would give you a chance to meet the other women in town, make some friends." She considered this, then nodded slowly. "I will think about it." But that night she brought it up again. "If I teach, I will need to go to town twice a week. I will need to take the wagon myself, learn the roads." "So we will make sure you know the roads," Colt said. "And I will teach you to handle the wagon team. You are already a decent rider. Driving will come natural." And so began another round of lessons, this time with Colt teaching Luna to manage the 2-horse team that pulled their wagon. She proved as adept with the reins as she had been in the saddle, and within 2 weeks, she was driving to town and back with confidence. She took the teaching position, and soon Colt would return from working the cattle to find Luna at the table, preparing lessons and practicing her English pronunciation. The children loved her, or so he heard from the parents when he went to town for supplies. She was patient and kind, they said, and she made learning fun. The mothers began to warm to her too, inviting her to quilting bees and church socials, drawing her into the community in a way that made Colt's heart swell with pride. Spring came late that year, but when it finally arrived, it brought an explosion of wildflowers across the pastures and new calves in the herd. Luna was there for the calving, helping when a birth went difficult, bottle feeding the few orphans, proving herself as much a rancher's wife as any woman born to it. She wore men's work pants now without self-consciousness, her hair braided practically down her back, her hands as capable as his own in many tasks. One evening in April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Luna took his hand and placed it on her belly. "We are going to have a baby," she said in English, then repeated it in Spanish for good measure. Colt felt the world tilt. "A baby?" "Yes, a baby. In October, I think." She watched his face anxiously. "Are you happy?" Happy seemed too small a word for what he felt. Terrified, elated, humbled, proud, all of those and more. "I am happy," he managed. "Luna, I am so happy I could shout it from the mountains." She laughed, that free, joyous sound he loved, and he pulled her into his arms and held her as if she were made of glass. A baby. His and Luna's baby. A new generation for the ranch. A living symbol of their love. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer. Luna continued teaching until the heat of August made the ride into town too uncomfortable, and then she focused on preparing the house for the baby. She washed and mended tiny clothes, prepared diapers from soft old sheets, set up the small storage room as a nursery with a cradle that Colt built from pine wood. He sanded it until it was smooth as silk, wanting nothing but the best for his child. They decided on names together, sitting at the kitchen table with Luna's journal open between them. For a boy, they would choose something strong and traditional. For a girl, something beautiful and meaningful. They made lists, crossed out names, added new ones, argued good-naturedly over the merits of each choice. "What about your mother's name?" Luna asked. "If we have a girl?" "Her name was Mary," Colt said. "Simple but nice." "Maria," Luna said, trying the Spanish version. "Maria Emmett. I like that." "And for a boy?" Colt asked. They settled on James, after Luna's father, with the middle name of Colt's father, William. James William Emmett or Maria something Emmett. That's something to be decided if the baby turned out to be a girl. Labor came on a cold October night, earlier than they had expected by a few weeks, but not so early as to be dangerous. The midwife, Mrs. Whitmore herself, came and took over the house with calm efficiency. She sent Colt and the ranch hands out to the barn with orders to stay there until called for, and then she closed the door on his protests. Those hours in the barn were the longest of Colt's life. He paced like a caged animal while Pete and Joaquin tried to distract him with talk of cattle prices and the coming winter. Every cry from the house made his heart stop, and he thought seriously about breaking down the door before Joaquin grabbed his arm and reminded him that women had been having babies since the beginning of time and Luna was strong and healthy and everything would be fine. When Mrs. Whitmore finally came to get him, the sun was just starting to lighten the eastern sky. Her face was tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "Big and healthy and loud. Your wife wants you." Colt nearly knocked her over in his haste to get inside. Luna lay in their bed, propped up on pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion, but her eyes were bright as stars. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the smallest, most perfect thing Colt had ever seen. "Meet your son," Luna said in Spanish, her voice hoarse. "James William Emmett." Colt approached slowly, hardly daring to breathe. The baby was indeed big, with a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. As Colt watched, the tiny eyes opened, and he found himself looking into dark blue eyes that would probably turn brown like Luna's. "Can I hold him?" Colt asked, his voice cracking. "He is your son," Luna said. "Of course you can hold him." She placed the baby in his arms with careful instruction, and Colt held his son for the first time, feeling the warm weight of him, the realness of him. This was his child, his and Luna's, a person who had not existed 9 months ago and who would carry their legacy forward. The responsibility of it was staggering. The joy of it was overwhelming. "Hello, Jamie," he whispered. "I am your papa. I am going to do my best to be a good one." The baby yawned, showing pink gums, and then promptly fell asleep. Colt looked at Luna, who was watching them both with an expression of pure contentment. "Thank you," he said, "for him, for coming here, for everything." "Thank me," Luna said softly. "You gave me a home, a family, love. I should thank you." "Then we are even," Colt said, and bent awkwardly with the baby in his arms to kiss her forehead. Mrs. Whitmore shooed him out after a few minutes, insisting that Luna needed rest. Colt handed Jamie back reluctantly and went to tell Pete and Joaquin the news. They congratulated him with backslaps and handshakes, and Joaquin produced a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for just such an occasion. They toasted baby James William Emmett and his mother and his father and the future of the ranch, and by the time the sun was fully up, Colt was pleasantly fuzzy around the edges and grinning like a fool. The first weeks with a new baby were exhausting in ways Colt had never imagined. Jamie was a good baby as babies went, but he still needed feeding every few hours, day and night, and he had a set of lungs that could probably be heard in the next county when he was unhappy. Luna bore it with more patience than Colt thought he could have managed, nursing the baby and cooing to him and somehow still managing to keep the house running and meals on the table. Colt helped where he could, walking the floor with Jamie when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, taking over some of the household chores so Luna could rest. He found he loved those late-night hours when it was just him and his son, the house quiet around them, Jamie's tiny fingers wrapped around one of his calloused ones. He would talk to the baby in both English and Spanish, telling him about the ranch, about his grandparents, about all the things they would do together when Jamie was older. As winter closed in again, they settled into a rhythm as a family. Luna returned to teaching 2 days a week, taking Jamie with her in a basket. The children loved having a baby in the schoolroom, and the mothers took turns holding him so Luna could teach. Colt focused on the ranch work, getting ready for another hard winter, making sure everything was secure and the hay stores were sufficient for the herd and the horses. On Christmas morning, with a fire crackling in the hearth and snow falling gently outside, Colt watched Luna nursing Jamie in the rocking chair and felt a peace he had never known before. This was what he had been longing for without knowing it, this sense of completeness, of family, of belonging to something larger than himself. "Merry Christmas," Luna said, looking up and catching him watching. "Merry Christmas," he replied. "Have I told you today that I love you?" She smiled, that beautiful smile that still made his heart skip. "Not yet today, but I know it anyway. I love you," he said, crossing to her and kneeling by the chair. "I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. And I love you," she said, switching Jamie to her other side. "My stubborn cowboy who learned Spanish just to talk to me. Best decision I ever made," Colt said. "Well, second best. First was sending for you in the first place." Jamie finished nursing and Colt took him, holding him against his shoulder and patting his back until the baby burped magnificently. Luna laughed, and Colt joined in, and it felt like the house itself was laughing with them, warm and alive and full of joy. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, the cattle herd grew, and Colt built a reputation as a fair dealer and a man of his word. Luna became a fixture in the Cheyenne community, beloved by her students and respected by the other women. She never completely lost her accent in English, just as Colt never perfected his Spanish, but they learned to communicate in that unique blend of both languages that became their private dialect. Jamie grew into a sturdy toddler with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes that had indeed turned brown, a mix of both of them in personality as well as looks. He was curious and fearless and loved the ranch with a passion that pleased Colt enormously. By the time he was 3, he was tagging after his father everywhere, wanting to help with every task, chattering away in both English and Spanish with the fluid bilingualism of a child raised with 2 languages. When Jamie was 4, Luna became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, with more sickness in the early months and more exhaustion toward the end. Colt worried, hovering over her in a way that made her laugh and push him away and tell him she was fine. Women had been having babies forever. He needed to stop treating her like she was made of sugar. But when the baby came in the spring of 1888, it was an easy birth, much faster than Jamie's had been. This time they had a daughter, small and delicate with a full head of dark hair and lungs as strong as her brother's had been. They named her Elena Rose Emmett, Elena for Luna's mother and Rose because Luna loved the wild roses that grew along the creek in summer. With 2 children, the house felt even more alive. Jamie was fiercely protective of his baby sister, always wanting to help take care of her, insisting on showing her his treasures and telling her stories even though she was too young to understand. Luna managed both children and the house and her teaching with a competence that awed Colt daily. She had found her place here in Wyoming, had made it her home as thoroughly as if she had been born to it. Sometimes, on summer evenings, they would all ride out together, Jamie in front of Colt on his horse, Elena in a carrier on Luna's back, to watch the sunset from the high meadow. Colt would point out the boundaries of their land, talk about the plans he had for expansion, for improvement, for the legacy he wanted to build for their children. Luna would add her own thoughts, her own dreams, and together they would plan their future. It was on one such evening, with Jamie sleeping against Colt's chest and Elena nursing contentedly, that Luna brought up the anniversary coming in August. "It will be 6 years since I came to Cheyenne," she said thoughtfully. 6 years since I stepped off that stagecoach not knowing what would happen. "Best day of my life," Colt said immediately. "You could not even talk to me?" Luna reminded him with a laugh. "Did not need to talk to know you were special," Colt said. "Though I will admit, learning to talk to you properly made everything better." "Do you remember when you finally had enough Spanish to really talk?" Luna asked. "Really say what you wanted to say?" Colt did remember. It had been about 4 months after she arrived, on a November evening. They had been sitting at the table after dinner, and he had taken her hand and said, slowly and carefully in Spanish, "I am falling in love with you. I wanted you to know." She had looked at him with those coffee-colored eyes wide with surprise, and then she had smiled and said, "Good, because I am already in love with you." "I remember," he said now. "That was when I knew everything would be all right. That we would be all right." "We are more than all right," Luna said, gesturing at the vista before them, at the ranch spread out below, at the children in their arms. "We are blessed." "Yes," Colt agreed. "We are." As the sun dipped below the mountains and the first stars began to appear, they headed back to the ranch house. The windows glowed with lamplight, welcoming them home, and smoke rose from the chimney into the darkening sky. Pete and Joaquin were probably finishing up in the barn, soon to head to their own supper in the bunkhouse. Another day was ending on the ranch, and tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more of the endless tasks that made up ranch life. But Colt rode with a light heart, his son warm against him, his wife and daughter beside him, and he thought about that August day 6 years ago when he had stood at the depot with his heart hammering and his future uncertain. He had been lonely then, desperate for connection, willing to take a chance on a woman he had never met based on translated letters and hope. He had gotten so much more than he had bargained for. He had gotten love, family, a partner in every sense of the word. He had gotten someone who challenged him and supported him and made him want to be better. He had gotten a home, not just a house but a real home filled with laughter and warmth and life. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Colt pulled Luna into his arms in their bed, that same bed where they had once slept with a careful gap between them. "Do you remember the first night?" he asked. "How awkward it was. I remember thinking you were very tall and wondering if you were disappointed that I was so short," Luna said with a laugh. "I remember being terrified and homesick and trying not to cry. I remember thinking you were the prettiest thing I had ever seen and being terrified you would hate the ranch and want to leave," Colt admitted. "Never," Luna said firmly. "This is my home. You are my home. And you are mine," Colt said. "Mi vida. Mi corazón. Mi to do. My life, my heart, my everything." The Spanish came easily now, as natural as breathing. "Te amo," Luna said. "I love you." "I love you too," Colt replied in English. "Now and always." They lay together in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch at night, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the eaves, the soft breathing of their children in the next room. Colt thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment, all the choices and chances and small miracles that had aligned to give them this life. He had learned Spanish to court his wife properly, and in doing so had gained so much more than a common language. He had gained understanding, connection, a bridge between their worlds that had allowed them to build something beautiful together. Their children would grow up speaking both languages, belonging to both cultures, stronger for the diversity of their heritage. The ranch would pass to them one day, this land that Colt's father had built and that Colt and Luna had expanded and improved. Jamie and Elena would stand on the same porch and watch the same sunsets, would work the same land, would hopefully feel the same deep satisfaction that came from a life lived close to the earth and the people you loved. But that was in the future. For now, Colt was content to hold his wife close and count his blessings. He had learned that love was more than a feeling, more than passion or attraction. It was a choice made every day, a commitment renewed with every sunrise. It was patience and kindness and the willingness to bridge divides, whether those divides were language or culture or simple human misunderstanding. As summer moved toward autumn that year, Colt began to plan something special for their anniversary. He wanted to do something meaningful, something that would show Luna how much he appreciated her and all she had brought to his life. He consulted with Joaquin, who had become not just an employee but a trusted friend over the years, and together they came up with a plan. On the evening of their anniversary, Colt arranged for Pete and Joaquin to watch the children. He saddled the horses and told Luna to dress for riding. She looked puzzled but did as he asked, and soon they were heading out toward the high meadow in the golden light of late afternoon. When they reached the meadow, Luna gasped. Colt had been up there earlier with Joaquin, and they had set up a small camp with blankets and pillows and a basket of food. A ring of stones held a small fire waiting to be lit, and lanterns hung from the surrounding trees, ready to provide light when darkness fell. "Colt," Luna breathed. "This is beautiful." "Not as beautiful as you," he said, helping her down from her horse. "But I wanted to do something special. To thank you for 6 years of making me the happiest man alive." They ate dinner as the sun set, a meal Luna's favorite foods that Colt had painstakingly prepared with help from Mrs. Whitmore. They talked and laughed and remembered, sharing stories from their years together, marveling at how much had changed since that awkward wedding day. When the stars came out, bright and clear in the thin mountain air, Colt pulled a package from his saddlebag and handed it to Luna. She opened it carefully to find a beautiful shawl, made of the finest wool, dyed a deep blue that matched the color she loved, with intricate embroidery along the edges. "It is from Mexico," Colt explained in Spanish. "I sent away for it months ago. I wanted you to have something from your homeland, to remember where you came from." Luna's eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect," she said. "But Colt, you are my home now. You and the children and this ranch. I do not need something from Mexico to remember. I carry my memories with me always. But this is beautiful, and I will treasure it." "I have something else," Colt said, suddenly nervous. He had been working on what he wanted to say for weeks, practicing the words in both languages until they felt right. "Luna, 6 years ago, I made a promise to you in English that you could not understand, and you made a promise to me in Spanish that I could not understand. We trusted each other and we took a leap of faith, and it worked out better than either of us could have dreamed." He took both her hands in his. "But we never really had a chance to say our vows knowing what they meant, understanding each other. So I want to say them now, here, under the stars with just the two of us and God as witness." Luna's tears spilled over, and she nodded, unable to speak. Colt took a deep breath and began, speaking in Spanish. "I, Colt Emmett, take you, Luna Alvarez Emmett, to be my wife, my partner, the love of my life. I promise to care for you in sickness and in health, to support your dreams, to stand by your side in good times and bad. I promise to always try to understand you, to bridge any gaps between us, to never stop working to be worthy of your love. I promise to be faithful and true until my last breath, and beyond if God allows it." Then he switched to English, saying the same words again, wanting her to hear them in both their languages. When he finished, Luna was crying in earnest, but she was smiling too. "Now you," he said gently. Luna composed herself and spoke, first in Spanish then in English, her accent wrapping around the English words like a caress. I, Luna Alvarez Emmett, take you, Colt Emmett, to be my husband, my home, my heart. I promise to love you with everything I am, to work beside you, to build our life together with joy and dedication. I promise to honor you and respect you and challenge you when you need challenging. I promise to be your partner in all things, to share your burdens and your triumphs, to grow old with you counting every day as a blessing. They sealed their renewed vows with a kiss, long and sweet and full of promise. And when they finally broke apart, the stars seemed to shine brighter overhead. They stayed in the meadow late into the night, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars whirl overhead. They talked about everything and nothing, made plans and dreamed dreams, simply enjoyed being together without the demands of children or ranch or daily life intruding. It was a gift, this stolen time, and they both knew it. When they finally rode back to the ranch house in the early hours of the morning, the children were asleep and the house was quiet. They crept to bed like teenagers afraid of being caught, stifling giggles, and fell asleep tangled together, perfectly content. The years continued to roll by, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Jamie proved to be a natural cattleman, with an eye for good stock and a patience with animals that reminded Colt of his father. Elena was more artistic, always drawing or making up stories, but she loved the ranch just as fiercely as her brother did. In 1891, Luna gave birth to another son, Thomas, who had his father's blonde hair and a personality as big as the Wyoming sky. The ranch continued to prosper. Colt expanded the herd, bought more land, built a bigger barn. Luna's teaching became a permanent position, and she was instrumental in getting a real schoolhouse built in Cheyenne instead of using the back room of the general store. The community grew and changed around them, more families moving in, the town becoming more established and civilized. But through all the changes, Colt and Luna remained the constants in each other's lives. They still mixed English and Spanish in their conversations, teaching all three children to be fluent in both. They still rode out to the high meadow on their anniversary each year, still renewed their vows under the stars. They weathered hard winters and dry summers, sick cattle and money troubles, all the challenges that came with ranch life and raising a family. They also experienced the joys, the triumphs, the small daily miracles that made it all worthwhile. Jamie's first successful horse breaking at 15. Elena's first published story in a Denver magazine at 16. Thomas learning to read at 4, faster than either of his siblings had. Luna being asked to serve on the school board, the first woman in the county to do so. Colt being elected to the Cattlemen's Association, his opinion sought and respected. In 1895, when Jamie was 12, Elena 9, and Thomas 4, Colt came home one evening to find Luna on the porch with a letter in her hands and tears streaming down her face. His heart seized, fearing bad news, but when he reached her, she was smiling through her tears. "What is it?" he demanded. "A letter from Mexico," she said, her voice shaking. "From a cousin I have not heard from in 10 years. She found me through the teaching position. Someone she knew saw my name and told her. Colt, I have family. I thought I was alone in the world except for you and the children, but I have cousins and uncles still living. She wants to visit, wants to meet you and the children." Colt pulled her into his arms, feeling her joy and relief as if it were his own. "Then we will write back and tell her to come. This is her home too if she wants it. Family is always welcome." The cousin, Rosa, came that summer with her husband and 2 children. It was a joyous reunion, Luna and Rosa staying up late into the night speaking rapid Spanish, catching up on years of lost time. The children got along immediately, and Colt liked Rosa's husband, a quiet man named Miguel who knew horses and was interested in learning about cattle ranching. That visit led to others, and gradually Luna reconnected with the family she had thought lost to her. It added another dimension to their lives, another thread in the rich tapestry they were weaving. The children learned about their Mexican heritage in more detail, heard stories about their grandparents and great-grandparents, developed pride in where they came from. In 1899, Jamie turned 16 and announced his intention to stay on the ranch and eventually take over from his father. Colt felt a surge of pride and relief. He had never pushed his son toward any particular path, wanting Jamie to choose for himself, but knowing the ranch would continue into another generation filled him with deep satisfaction. Elena, at 13, was talking about becoming a teacher like her mother, or maybe a writer, or maybe both. She was bright and ambitious, and Colt knew she would do whatever she set her mind to with excellence. Thomas, at 8, was still young enough that his future was uncertain, but he showed an aptitude for numbers that suggested he might be the one to handle the business side of the ranch. As the new century dawned, Colt and Luna stood on their porch watching the sun rise on January 1st, 1900, and reflected on how far they had come. They were in their 40s now, no longer young but not yet old, their children half-grown, their life together solidly established. "Do you have any regrets?" Colt asked, pulling Luna close against the morning chill. "Not a single one," Luna said firmly. "Do you?" "Only that I did not learn Spanish faster," Colt said with a smile. "I wasted so much time not being able to really talk to you." "You talked to me in other ways," Luna said. "Through your actions, your kindness. I knew who you were before you could say it in Spanish." "Still," Colt said, "I am glad I learned. I am glad I made the effort. And I am glad I came," Luna said. "That I took the chance on a stranger's advertisement. That I was brave enough to travel so far for a new life." "We were both brave," Colt said. "And we were both lucky." They stood together watching the dawn light spread across their land, illuminating the house they had filled with love, the barn and corrals where they had built their livelihood, the pastures where their cattle grazed. This was their kingdom, small perhaps in the grand scheme of the world, but vast in its importance to them and their children. The years ahead would bring more changes, more challenges. Children would grow up and perhaps move away or perhaps stay close. Grandchildren might come in time, adding another generation to the ranch's legacy. The world itself would change in ways they could not imagine, technology and progress marching forward relentlessly. But whatever came, Colt and Luna would face it together, partners in every sense of the word. Their love forged strong through years of choosing each other every single day. They had started as strangers separated by language and culture, brought together by chance and necessity. They had become friends, lovers, spouses, parents, building a life together that was richer and fuller than either could have achieved alone. As the sun cleared the horizon, flooding the world with golden light, Luna turned in Colt's arms and kissed him softly. "Happy New Century, mi amor," she said. "Happy New Century, sweetheart," he replied. "Here is to the next 100 years. We probably will not make it to 100, Luna said practically. "Then here is to however many years we get," Colt amended. "As long as I have you, that is enough." "Sentimental cowboy," Luna teased, but her eyes were bright with love. "You're sentimental cowboy," Colt corrected. "Always and forever." They went inside to start breakfast, to wake the children, to begin another day on the ranch. The routine was familiar, comforting in its predictability, but Colt never took it for granted. Every morning he woke up next to Luna was a gift. Every meal shared with his family was a blessing. Every sunset watched from the porch was a reminder of how lucky he had been. He had learned Spanish to court his wife properly, and in doing so had learned so much more. He had learned that love transcends language, that connection requires effort and patience and willingness to step outside your comfort zone. He had learned that the best things in life often come from taking risks, from being brave enough to reach for what you want even when the outcome is uncertain. Most of all, he had learned that home is not a place but a person, or in his case, several persons. Home was Luna's laugh and Jamie's determination and Elena's creativity and Thomas's enthusiasm. Home was Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and anniversary celebrations in the high meadow. Home was the life they had built together, brick by brick, word by word, day by day. As Colt stood at the stove flipping flapjacks while Luna set the table and the children tumbled into the kitchen with morning chaos, he felt a contentment so deep it was almost like prayer. This was what he had been seeking when he wrote to that matrimonial agency all those years ago. Not just a wife to ease his loneliness, but a partner to share his life. Not just someone to keep house and bear children, but someone to laugh with and dream with and grow old alongside. He had found all that and more in Luna. She had crossed borders and overcome obstacles to give him the gift of her presence, her love, her loyalty. And he had worked hard to be worthy of that gift, to be the man she deserved, to build the life she had hoped for when she took that leap of faith. In the end, the story of Colt and Luna Emmett was a simple one, the kind repeated in thousands of variations across the frontier. A man and a woman, brought together by circumstance, choosing to make a life together despite the odds. But for those who lived it, for Colt and Luna themselves, it was epic and unique and precious beyond measure. Years later, when Colt was old and gray and his children were grown with children of their own, he would tell the story of how he met their grandmother. He would tell them about the stagecoach arriving and the woman who spoke no English and the desperate 4 months of learning Spanish so he could court her properly. He would tell them about that moment when he finally had enough words to say, "I am falling in love with you," and hear her say, "I am already in love with you." And his grandchildren would listen wide-eyed, enchanted by the romance of it, the adventure of it, the idea that love could bloom between two people who could not even speak the same language at first. They would ask questions and beg for more details, and Colt would oblige, painting pictures with words of a younger version of himself and his beloved Luna. But in those quiet moments before sleep, when he lay in the bed he had shared with Luna for decades, her warm presence beside him even now, Colt would think about how inadequate words were to truly capture what they had. How could he explain the feeling of coming home to her smile after a long day? How could he describe the pride of watching her teach or the wonder of seeing his children grow up bilingual and bicultural? How could he put into words the simple, profound joy of being known and loved completely by another person? He could not really. But he could live it every day, and that was better than any words could ever be. On a spring morning in 1915, Colt woke to find Luna already awake beside him, watching him with those coffee-colored eyes that had captivated him 33 years earlier. The sun was just beginning to light the room, and somewhere in the house, he could hear movement. Probably Jamie and his wife, who lived on the ranch now with their 3 children. Or maybe Elena, who had come to visit with her husband and their 2 children. Or Thomas, who managed the ranch accounts and lived in town but visited frequently. "What are you thinking about?" Luna asked softly in Spanish. "Everything," Colt replied in the same language. "How lucky I am. How grateful." "We are both lucky," Luna said. "We chose well." "We did," Colt agreed. "I would choose you again in a heartbeat." "And I would choose you," Luna said, "even knowing all the hard work you would be." He laughed at that, the sound rusty but genuine. "I was hard work?" "The hardest," Luna confirmed, but she was smiling. "But worth it. Always worth it." They rose together to face another day, moving with the careful synchronization of long partnership. Colt watched Luna dress, marveling that she could still make his heart skip after all these years. Her hair was gray now, her face lined, but to him, she was as beautiful as the day she stepped off that stagecoach. Breakfast was a cheerful chaos with 3 generations around the table, conversation flowing in English and Spanish and back again. The grandchildren were being taught both languages just as their parents had been. ensuring that Luna's heritage remained a living part of the family identity. Colt looked around the table at the faces of his children and grandchildren and felt a satisfaction that went bone deep. This was his legacy, not just the ranch or the land, but these people, these connections, this love that would ripple forward through generations. After breakfast, he and Luna walked out to the high meadow, a tradition they maintained when weather and health allowed. It took them longer now than it used to, their steps slower, their pauses more frequent. But they made it, and they sat on the same spot where Colt had renewed their vows so many years ago. "Tell me a story," Luna said, leaning against his shoulder. "What kind of story?" Colt asked. "Our story," Luna said. "Start at the beginning." So Colt did, his voice quiet in the morning air, weaving together memory and emotion into narrative. He told her about the loneliness that had driven him to write to the matrimonial agency, about the excitement and terror of waiting for her arrival, about that first glimpse of her stepping off the stagecoach. He told her about the frustration of not being able to communicate and the determination that had driven him to learn Spanish. He told her about falling in love gradually and then all at once, about the joy of their first real conversation, about the pride of watching her become part of the community. Luna listened with her eyes closed, a small smile on her face, occasionally correcting a detail or adding her own perspective. It was a story they both knew by heart, had lived through together, but it never got old in the telling. It was the foundation of everything they were, the beginning of the life they had built. When Colt finished, Luna opened her eyes and looked at him. "We did good, did we not?" "We did very good," Colt confirmed. "Better than I ever hoped." "I have one regret," Luna said suddenly. Colt's heart lurched. "What is it?" "I wish we had more time," Luna said simply. "I know we have been blessed with years together, but I am greedy. I want more. I want forever." "Then forever is what we will have," Colt said firmly. "In this life and whatever comes after. You are stuck with me, Luna Emmett." "Good," she said, and kissed him with a tenderness that made his eyes sting with tears. They sat together in the meadow for a long time, holding hands, watching the clouds drift across the sky, listening to the sounds of the ranch below. This was peace, Colt thought. This was contentment. This was love, mature and tested and proven strong. Eventually, they made their way back to the house, back to the demands and joys of family, back to the life they had built together through determination and faith and an enormous amount of work. And as Colt held the door for Luna, watching her step into the house filled with their descendants, he thought about that moment 33 years ago when he had first said in Spanish, "Now I can court you proper." He had courted her, and won her, and loved her with everything he had. And she had given him the same in return, measure for measure, year after year, creating something beautiful and lasting out of what had started as a transaction between strangers. That was the real miracle, Colt thought. Not that they had overcome the language barrier, though that was impressive enough, but that they had chosen each other every day, had worked to understand each other not just in words but in spirit, had built a partnership based on respect and affection and genuine friendship as well as passion. The sun set that evening in a blaze of color, and Colt and Luna sat on their porch with mugs of coffee, watching the light fade. The children and grandchildren had gone to their various homes, and it was just the two of them again, as it had been in the beginning. "Colt," Luna said. "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for learning Spanish," she said. "Thank you for making the effort to meet me where I was instead of demanding I do all the changing." "Best effort I ever made," Colt said. "Changed my whole life." "Changed both our lives," Luna corrected. "We changed each other." "For the better," Colt said. "For the better," Luna agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, those same stars that had witnessed their renewed vows so many years ago, that would continue to shine long after they were gone. But their legacy would remain, Colt knew, in the children and grandchildren, in the stories that would be told, in the love that would continue to ripple forward through generations. He had been a lonely cowboy once, desperate enough to send for a mail-order bride, uncertain of what he would get but hoping for the best. He had gotten so much more than he could have imagined. He had gotten a partner, a love, a home in the truest sense of the word. And it had all started with a woman who spoke only Spanish and a cowboy determined enough to learn it so he could court her proper. Everything else had flowed from that decision, that commitment to bridge the gap between them. It had been hard work, learning a new language as an adult, but it had been worth every frustrating hour, every stumbled phrase, every grammatical error. Because in learning to speak to Luna, Colt had learned to truly see her, to understand her, to appreciate the full complexity of who she was. And she had done the same for him, learning his language both literally and figuratively, meeting him halfway and then some. That was what love was, Colt had learned. Not just a feeling but an action, a choice made over and over. It was learning someone's language, whether that language was Spanish or simply their way of seeing the world. It was making the effort to understand, even when understanding was difficult. It was showing up, day after day, year after year, choosing your person over and over again. As the night deepened and the air grew cool, Colt and Luna went inside to their warm house. They prepared for bed with the easy familiarity of decades of shared routine. And when they finally lay down together in the darkness, Colt pulled Luna close and whispered in her ear, first in Spanish, then in English, the words he never tired of saying. Te amo, mi vida. I love you, my life. Yo te amo, Luna whispered back. And I love you, always and forever, mi vaquero. My cowboy, Colt translated in his head, smiling in the darkness. Yes, he was her cowboy, just as she was his bride, his wife, his love. They had started as strangers brought together by chance and necessity, separated by language and culture. They had become something so much more, united by choice and commitment and love. That was their story, simple and profound, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. It was a story of the West, of hard work and new beginnings and the courage to take risks. But more than that, it was a love story, the best kind, the kind that lasted. And as Colt drifted off to sleep with Luna in his arms, he gave thanks for that August day in 1882, when a stagecoach had rattled into Cheyenne, carrying the woman who would change his life forever. He gave thanks for the frustration that had driven him to learn Spanish, for the patience that had allowed their love to grow, for every moment of the life they had built together. It had been a good life, he thought drowsily. A very good life indeed. And if he had it all to do over again, he would not change a single thing, except perhaps to learn Spanish even faster so he could have started courting her proper even sooner. But in the end, they had found their way to each other, and that was all that mattered. The ranch slept under the Wyoming stars, the cattle settled in their pastures, the horses quiet in the barn. Inside the house, the newest generation of Emmets dreamed their own dreams, carrying forward the legacy of love and hard work that Colt and Luna had established. The story would continue, new chapters written by new hands, but the foundation would remain strong, built on the love of two people who had bridged every gap to find each other, and then had chosen each other every day for the rest of their lives.